Okay, welcome back, everyone. Our next speaker is a producer at the multi-award-winning studio Us2 Games, the team behind the critically acclaimed Monument Valley series, which I'm a huge fan of, Land's End, Whale Trail, and Blip Blop. In this talk, he's going to discuss things learned over the last 7 years he spent at Us2 Games and share insights into maximising success making premium mobile games. So please welcome Mike Anderson.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for that really lovely introduction, Gabby. Also, thanks to everyone at Konsoll, not just the organizers, but the attendees. Everyone here is like freakishly lovely, and I'm slightly suspicious now. You must have a dark side, and I'll try and find it out before I go back to London. So, do people recognize these games? Maybe just by show of hands, quickly? Okay, that's enough. Cool. All right, because I'm stupid, I forgot to put a few slides. I sort of made the assumption people would know these games in my vast arrogance. But yeah, I'm going to talk to you for the next 45 minutes or so about things we've learned making these games with a massive focus on Monument Valley 1, simply because that's the game where we made a name for ourselves, and it wouldn't be fair to just be like, Monument Valley 2, we didn't have any marketing. Like, the success of Monument Valley 1 has driven the success of future titles, so I want to be fair on that. So, first little intro, what we refer to as lore in the industry. Who am I? I'm Mike. You should have been paying attention. So I'm a producer. I'm going to tell you more about stuff I've done. This is like my 4th job in the industry. I used to work at these places, Sega, back in the UK. That was my first, it was my dream job. I was a games tester. I had just graduated, testing like a bajillion games in the space of a year. It was actually quite terrible. But it was character building, I guess. Moved on from there to Lionhead Studios, where I worked on a project which was canned in true Lionhead Studios fashion, so it's never going to see the light of day, and I can't even tell you what it was. And then moved to this other studio called IdeaWorks, which was a mobile game studio. I think I'm going to be the 3rd speaker in a row to reference the N-Gage, but they made a name for themselves by porting Tomb Raider, Pandemonium, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater to the N-Gage back in the day. I always tell people this company's shut down, but that's not true. They've just rebranded to the very British-sounding Marmalade game studio. So they're still around the area, East London somewhere. So from there, I joined this company called Us2 Games. It's really cool. I'm going to tell you all about that. While I have a platform, I want to quickly do a shameless plug. Me and a few friends have this organization in the UK called POC and Play, and it's sort of a diversity and inclusion initiative, just trying to sort of help underrepresented ethnic people be represented in the games industry. And I had to do it, I'm sorry. So what do I do at Us2 Games as a producer? We're still a pretty small studio. We have about 30 people, including a few contractors. And so regular stuff, scheduling, big meetings. My main thing I try and do is just keep my team unblocked. I just try and I keep them hydrated. People are really bad at drinking water, so I'm constantly like saying, have you drunk water today? No. All right, have some. I give them hugs when they feel sad. I just do anything that they need to be unblocked. Maybe it's just a piece of software. Maybe it's my Wacom tablet's broken. Can I get a new one? I buy all that stuff so they could just focus entirely on what they're paid to do, basically. So who are Us2 Games? There's actually quite a lot of misinformation out there. There's a company called Us2, and people assume that Us2 and Us2 Games are exactly the same thing, and then gets into a lot of confusion. So I'm going to give you a bit more lore into Us2. So it was founded back in 2004 by these two men. Two people founded the company, hence the name. Mills and Sinks. Mills is the one who only wears shorts. So this guy. And so they started out making like apps and mobile, before apps even. They made like wallpapers for Sony Ericsson phones. They did like themes. I believe they made the Walkman application on some of the old Sony Ericsson phones, if anyone's young enough to remember that sort of stuff. As of today, they have 6 studios worldwide. I'm really sorry, these are supposed to be Unicode flags that I made on my Mac, but they don't work on Windows. So studio in London was the first one they built. Then Sweden, they had one in Malmo, New York. These 3 sort of sync up with roughly when we made Monument Valley, and since then they've expanded to Australia, Japan, and now Portugal. The reason they started even like entertaining the idea of making games is because a lot of the work they did was what is known as white label work. Basically means you would do work for a client. They were a client-facing company. Create something for this client and don't be credited for it in any way. Just get paid, and no one knows the fact that you made this awesome piece of software. So obviously for a company who relies on additional clients, it's not the best thing to do. So the company was taking some of its profits, investing it back in itself, and had a small studio within the studio making original IPs. Stuff like this, playful things. This app was called Mouth Off. It's simply a little mouth replacement app. You just hold the phone in front of your mouth and speak, and the mouth will move in time with your voice. And it sort of just let people know, like, we're here, we do kind of cool stuff. Also, we can do this really serious stuff. And they expanded from that to making their first game called Whale Trail. Anyone know Whale Trail? It's pretty cool. Oh, nice, there's a few. So Whale Trail was like their first very like serious attempt at making games. And it did kind of well for them over like a space of 2 years. I think they spent like £250,000 working on it. They weren't quite sure what to do, but they knew there was something in games, and they decided that they'd want to hire some games industry professionals, myself included, and do a really serious job at making games. So fast forward from like 2004 when they founded to this is roughly 2014 after Monument Valley came out. This is the team. This is me with like much less hair, which is normally the reverse of what happened. You expect to have less hair now. This is the team. We had just won the Apple Design Award, which was pretty awesome. And the success of Monument Valley has allowed us to expand now over the course of the past 5 years. The studio looks more like this now. We actually managed to hire some women. I think we've actually got more women than men right now, which is pretty cool. And some of us are still here. Some of us have like more hair than we did before. Some of us have kids now. And yeah, we remained part of the London studio, which I mentioned before, until about 2016, where we basically moved out of our parents' house. We had enough money. We basically are independently owned now. We still do visit, but we're in a completely separate studio somewhere else in London now. And yeah. Thank you. I'm glad that landed. I wasn't sure. Okay, cool. Has everyone read it? Cool. Have you had some, though? Everyone drink, please. I'm being produced. Have you all drank enough water today? Or eaten vegetables or fruits? Okay. So I've tried to distill the past, 7 years of what we've been doing into, 5 simple steps that I'm going to talk to you all about now. These are the things we try and do with every project we do, not just Monument Valley, but everything we've done, because we're trying to basically replicate the success of Monument Valley. So why wouldn't we try and redo the things we did before? First off, it's stand out. Very important. We use the test a lot. We try to respect our players. We aim to be platform perfect. And we also have reasonable and realistic metrics for success. So I'm just going to dive straight into standing out. So I quickly, before my talk, looked at a stat, and apparently it's about 1 million games. I think it's 900,000 games on the App Store. I'm going to round up to 1 million. so that I can just say your chances of being seen on App Store are 1 in a million. So how do you stand out? How do you make something that people are going to look at? I mean, there are some common sort of tropes in games right now. There's very popular games like, I don't know, Clash of Clans, or any game which has an icon with a man, like sort of, sort of always online strategy games. So we thought, okay, we need to make a game that will stand out. Maybe if it didn't look like a game, people will be like, that's weird, what is this thing? So we basically just looked at inspiration outside of games. We didn't want to conform to preconceived notions, because if someone doesn't like the Angry Man base building strategy game and your game looks like that, they're not going to look at it. So we took inspiration from things like this. This is MC Escher. Hope you all know Escher. Creates these optical illusions and sort of like a really awesome artist. So this is like one of the main themes of the game. We also had an internal target for the game where every screen of the game would be like a work of art in itself. And our lead designer, Ken, he had a massive interest in architecture, world architecture. So stuff like this. These are some steps in Spain. These are some cool roofs in Russia. These really cool crenellations, and even the color palette. This is from Uzbekistan. I think that's Pakistan, or is it Iran? Check my notes. I think it's Pakistan. I didn't write it down. And so our game is built based on things like that. This is a film called The Fall, which Ken was really into. Apparently no one's ever seen. It's apparently like a very, very niche, tiny audience, but really striking visuals, all these sorts of things. This looks literally like some of the stuff we put in the game. We just basically took all these inspirations, all the things that we cared about and were passionate about, and just put them in the game, because we were like, we're 8 people. There's no way we can compete with like these teams where they have more people on the user acquisition side of things than we have making the whole game. Monument Valley too, we doubled down on this sort of thing. So we were taking inspiration from things like candy. These are licorice, all sorts. They're very delicious. If you've never tried them, I recommend you do. This is the National Theatre in London. And we just was sort of, you could say we stole this stuff, but we thought it was cool, and we wanted to just bring it to a new audience. We don't know how many people are into this sort of stuff, but we just sort of tried to find a way to make it accessible and manageable and nice. We even have Kimchi, the drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race. Lauren, I think basically everyone in the studio at the time of Monument Valley 2 was really into Drag Race, and we were like, all of these looks are so good, all these colors are so bold, why are we not just making a game that looks like that? And also Kimchi actually tweeted when she found out that we used it, and she was like, I love this game. So that was awesome. Something we learned during development, we did it on Monument Valley 1, but was you could just print out all the screens of the game. If you're trying to make a game with a very strong visual style, you can print all the things out and just check that every individual screen is striking in some way. So we always wanted to have it so every screen of the game would be like a work of art. It should stand up as a work of art on itself, and then it should also stand up on a mechanical level as a game with some gameplay to engage with. We're not the only people doing this sort of thing. There's a really cool story about this game, Alto's Odyssey, if anyone's played it. Little humble brag, the guy who makes it works in the studio with us. His name's Harry, and he's my friend. And he basically made a premium Endless Runner game, and Endless Runners are very common as a free-to-play game on mobile, but something about the visual style of this lets you know that it's sort of, it's premium. It feels like something you want to pay for. You can tell that there's been a lot of love and a lot of craft put into it. And so it stood out. I believe he's won numerous awards for this, and he's getting the sort of critical reception and acclaim that it deserves. There's also stuff like Old Man's Journey and other titles which sort of occupy the same sort of space as Monument Valley. There's Prune by Joel McDonald, and I put this in there because he was like one person working on this game, and I think maybe he had 2 other people, but you don't need to be as big as we were, basically. If you want to do this, you could still. I think he came up with this style because he was a programmer, and it was easier for him to make these sort of like procedural-looking trees. But it's very striking, and it clearly draws on like inspiration from Japanese bonsai stuff. You can also stand out thematically. Monument Valley 2 is a game about a mother and her child. We're not used to seeing too many games about mothers and children, really, or it's going to be some sort of really weak plot device, like, here's your mum's been killed, now get revenge on the people who killed your mum. And we thought that was really whack. We thought we are privileged enough to like take risks in the studio. Remember, at this time, we had a bunch of money in the bank from Monument Valley 1. So we made Ro the main character. The daughter actually does not have a name. She actually has like almost no personality. I mean, they don't have faces, but we've given Ro, she has a hobby. She plays the flute. She has friends. She has a job. She's got everything. We just were like, we don't see any games about mothers. let's put it in. At this point as well, some of the people on the team had kids, and it was like a very personal sort of story. So you could do this sort of stuff. You could focus on the art stuff. There's no reason why you can't sort of stack things up to stand out. So we already had the visual style and also just added like this additional layer of things that sort of get us on people's radar. We also user test a lot. This is something that we learned from being based in London with all these user experience designers. They were constantly like, without even fully playable prototypes, they might just be like some doodles on a notepad and be like, this is a banking app. I need you to take out some money. Can you just try and take out money with this thing? Like, explain to me how you're going to interact with this thing, how you're going to use it. And you just say, oh, I'm going to tap withdraw, and they would just like not respond to you. They wouldn't say anything to you. They just leave you with it, watch how you interact, and see if you got stuck. They'd write a little note and know that they need to improve on that thing. So we use that same philosophy. This is an illustrator called Mr. Bingo, who does like really rude postcards. You should look him up. He's also a very nice and cool guy. So we use this mindset. When we made anything in the game, we would just grab people. The studio had about 80 people, 8 people on the games team and 72 just employees. We had like a financial director in his 60s with a bunch of kids, and we would just grab people randomly, be like, can you just play this? Like, can you try and go from the bottom of this to the top? And we just leave them. And they'd be like, I'm really bad at games. We're like, you're perfect for the game we're trying to make. And we just leave them. And whenever they got stuck, sometimes it was extremely painful to watch people not understand your game design, but we understood that that's because we sucked at designing it, and it's not a problem of them not understanding it, it's just you've not communicated that information to them well enough. So user tested more. We constantly did this. This process of user testing is like sort of integral to us achieving the vision. We basically wanted to make a game anyone could complete. So we basically tested on like almost everyone in the studio. We would ask people, have you played it at all yet? Okay, cool. And try and constantly get new people who'd never even touched the game. It helped us identify things which we call wow moments. So because the game, we were like, we don't want to make a really long game. We're small enough. We want to make a game that a small studio can make. It's only going to last maybe 90 minutes. We want to be all killer, no filler. So in every separate chapter, we would keep putting stuff that we thought was impressive until we call them wow moments because basically we wanted the player testers to just go, wow, that was cool. So until they did that, we just kept tweaking everything. So there's a new mechanic in every chapter. Something new happens every time to keep you engaged. We don't try and regurgitate mechanics or anything like that. But seriously, like user testing is super effective. It's like one of the easiest things I think you can do. You can always probably find someone to test for you. And just, yeah, keep trying. Just keep going. Like there's one of the things I hate the most, so I'm going on a small rant now, is when I play a game and I feel like I'm too stupid to play the game. I played a few puzzle games recently, which are really good, but you reach this wall where you're like, I don't feel like you've taught me enough, and I don't know the mind of the creator to understand how to play, and so I just stop playing the game, and you don't want to do that. So that links in a lot to respect the player. I mean, it actually says retupect, but that's okay, he's a cute kid. So the 2 ways in which you can respect your players are, 1, respect their time. This hourglass is quite ominous, but we don't have that many, we don't have that much time on this little rock in space. So do you want to like make an experience where people have like fond memories and be like, oh my God, this game was the first game I ever played, or this is the first time I saw my mom play a game, or this game when I played it with my daughter, it reminded me of our relationship and all this cool stuff? Or do you want to have made a game where people go, I remember that phase where I was hooked on that thing for a bit? Like, I think it's really important that you want to try and leave people with like a nice memory in their heart or in their mind about cool things. And also, leading on to what I was talking about, like repeated mechanics, we were like, we just want 90 minutes of your time. We're going to give you a lovely 90 minutes, and then you just go about your life. You're not going to obsess about this game. You're not going to just go crazy. It's not going to keep you up at night. You're not going to be like constantly checking your phone to check how much energy you've regenerated. It's just, you enjoy this game, maybe tell a friend because it was cool. That's it. You can also respect the intelligence of your players. So this links in a lot with all the user testing we were doing. So there's a joke we had in the studio, which was that games don't have UX, but they have UI. So like any time when a player would get stuck with things, games would just say, oh, do this, and you get these massively long-winded tutorials like, do this, hold R while pressing X to do the thing. And it's like, can you just let me feel like I've sort of worked the things out myself so I feel a bit smart? And Monument Valley has about 9 words in English of tutorial text. It just says, tap the path to move either, and hold and rotate, which explains how you interact with things. Other than that, we just We leave you to it, and we have confidence of faith that the players will be able to understand how to play the game. We feel like through the user testing, we know that we've signposted everything enough, so they're not going to get stuck. They'll just keep going through it. And like our stat is that I think more than half of players finish the whole experience, which I think is actually a very high number. I don't know how that compares to other games, but I think over half your players completing a game is a very good thing to be proud of. Any more things I need to mention for my notes? No. Okay. What have I got next? Aim to be platform perfect. This is a term we use internally all the time, and it's quite self-explanatory. It's basically build the experience for the platform and try and take full advantage of all its features and all the things that make it good. Monument Valley originally was going to be an iPad-only game because we felt that iPhones were too small. And we thought, okay, iPad, it's got a nice big screen. We're like, okay, let's focus on the visuals then. Things look great on this device. What else? It's tactile. You could tap on things. All right, let's have this like one-to-one direct interaction with everything on the thing, everything on the screen. It'd be really cool. We did user testing again, as I keep saying, and we found that actually the game did work on iPhones as well. People didn't struggle. We thought things wouldn't be super readable, but that's why you test. That's why you check this stuff. You don't just sort of assume anything. You just double check it, have a bit of data. User testing can help solve so many things like design conflicts. You'd be like, I think this is good. I think this is good. Let the user decide. So that was really cool. I mean, we had, what's the concept? What do you call it again? Have you heard of this idea of a coffee table book? So like when you have your fancy coffee table, you have like a fancy book on there, which would be like a talking piece. So if you invited some friends over for dinner, and they'd be like, oh, what's that? And you'd be like, oh, haven't you seen this? This is the new blah, blah, blah collection. So we wanted Monument Valley to be like a coffee table game. So like someone would come over and be like, oh, what's that? I'd be like, oh, that's the new Monument Valley on my new iPad. Haven't you seen that? And you would show off things. And all of this sort of ties into the idea of luxury and premium and being like, oh, it's really fancy. This is a screenshot from Land's End, which is our VR title. Originally, this was made for the Samsung Gear VR. If anyone knows what that is, it was like the first sort of foray into mobile VR headsets. And at the time, VR was just like, it was insane. There was like no established input methods. You had to like you had to take your phone out, and then you had to connect a Bluetooth controller to the phone, put the phone back in the headset, put the headset on, and then you had this like clunky, weird thing, and like all the games that we played made us throw up in like 3 seconds. And it was just a huge nightmare. So we were like, all right, what are the strengths of this platform? How can we like really focus on what makes this platform good? The main thing was that the Gear VR was supposed to be the most accessible way to play VR. You don't have all these like cables. Or if anyone's ever used like any Oculus Rift with the massive cable thing, and you couldn't really move around. This was like wireless. You could give it to anyone. It's like the most accessible VR platform. So we said, why do we make the most accessible VR game? So we decided we wouldn't use controllers at all. The game's entirely played just, you put the headset on and you just look around like this. And Oculus loves it. They keep featuring us all the time. Like it's a good way, like if you make someone's hardware look good, they're gonna feature you, and it's mutually beneficial. Like our game made it look like it was good to get a Gear VR. And Gear VR would like make it so people paid up for our game. Same thing with Apple. Apple release new phones all the time. There's stuff like when we made Monument Valley 2, iPhones didn't have this. There was no such thing as notch. Notch came out after, and we were like, okay, they've made this new phone with a notch. Let's make the game support this notch. We did it for the first game, we did it for the second game, and it just turned out that Apple stopped featuring any games that weren't supporting the notch. So even just by being a bit proactive and being smart and being like, let's jump on this thing, it's literally brought money into the company. Similarly, the new iPads support 120 hertz refresh rates, and previously it was 60, so things can look super smooth now. So we were like, oh, we bought the new iPad, we were like, let's more for like, just so we could see how cool it would look. We made it 120 hertz and pushed it out onto the App Store as an update. Say, hey, if you've got the new iPad Pro, you could play the game at like twice the refresh rate. A few months down the line, Apple get in touch with us, say, do your games support 120? It's called ProMotion, which is actually the worst thing to ever try and search. If you type Apple ProMotion, you literally don't find anything about this technology. But yeah, they said, do your games support 120 hertz? We're like, yeah, they do. And it's like, okay, cool. Get featured, massive spike in sales, and it's just sort of just aim to play to the strengths of the platform is what I'm getting at. Next one. I don't know why I picked this image. I thought it was cool. It's quite deep. Success is a journey, not a destination. So try and have reasonable and realistic metrics for your success. Does anyone know what this game is? Has anyone ever played this game? Has anyone ever downloaded this game? Okay, so it's called Blip Blup. We released it in 2013, and it was basically made with the exact same team, with the exception of one team member. It was basically made with the exact same team as Monument Valley, but this was like a complete failure. So yeah, we released this game back in 2013. It's, in my opinion, still a very good game. It looks very gamey, and it was like our attempt at making a game with this newly formed, games industry pro team. It did terribly. Like, I'm still proud of it. I think it's really cool. There's actually a new game that's come out. It's a free-to-play game, and I think it's called like Roller Splat, and it basically has copied the entire aesthetic of our game. But I'm not. Sorry, that sounds like I'm being really bitter about it. But while it wasn't a commercial success, it was successful in a bunch of other ways. First of all, we shipped this game, and I think it's really important to realize that shipping a game is a success in itself. It's extremely freaking hard to get games out. Second thing is, we had never made a game together. We didn't know anything about each other. We basically just, the companies hired random people who they thought were cool and said, go in a room and make games. And we managed to learn a lot about what each other's passions are, what makes us all tick. So it's successful in that way. The most important way it was successful is that it's built with Unity, which would go on to be the tool that we've basically used for all of our games now. And none of us knew how to sort of collaborate using Unity. We've used it before, personally. We weren't sure how it integrates with Git or any sort of source control software. So it did really well. It was in that sense, it was good. Obviously, we had the luxury of sort of the support of a big company, and we were so privileged to take all these risks. But that's why I'm here telling you now, because I'm trying to share all the knowledge that I've been so privileged to gain and share with you all. This is the actual email from Mills, the shorts guy, telling us what we had to achieve with Monument Valley. So we didn't really have super strict things. Back in the day, it was called Zenith. This is probably the most audacious one, which is win iPad Game of the Year 2013, at the very least. We did actually get Game of the Year, but it was 2014 because we missed our estimated release date. Main thing I want to get here is, even though we felt like we had something really, really good with Monument Valley, we never sort of let that go to our heads. 200,000 copies in year one is actually very modest and quite conservative estimate. We didn't ever let ourselves get too cocky or anything. Knowing our track record, we maybe will only sell 200,000 in year one. We actually sold 2.4 million or something. But anyway, so yeah, this is from Mills. This was he says no pressure at the end, it's cool. It's clearly a lot of pressure when the CEO sends this. And if I'm entirely honest, I feel like if Monument Valley wasn't a success, I might not be here right now, because it had reached a point where we had been just spending all this money and never ever succeeding. I think I'm going way too fast. I'm not sure. I'll try and slow down. So yeah, actually that's all of these. So yeah, I've gone way too fast. I'm gonna have to answer 1,000 questions then. So these are things I want you to try. Try and stand out. Draw on all the things you love in the world and put them in your game. What's the worst thing that's gonna happen? Someone's gonna see it and like it. There's no reason why you should be trying to rush and try and conform. As I say, if someone already has a preconceived notion of things they don't like, and you make something that looks like that, they're probably not going to be interested. Use the test a lot. Test on your parents. Depending on who your target audience is, we tried to go as mainstream, as wide as possible. We wanted to make a game which was basically the first game people ever complete. So that's why we tested on everyone, and it sort of has gone down well. Respect your players, respect their time, respect their intelligence. Don't try not to hold their hand too much with stuff, but that just basically means you probably have to do a bunch more user testing and try and sort of iron out all the pain points, iron out all the wrinkles in your design, and just make people feel like they've achieved something, as opposed to just being told exactly what to do. And then you go, yeah, you did exactly what I told you to do, you're so smart. Aim to be platform perfect. Play to the strengths of whatever hardware you're developing for. If you're doing something with Switch, maybe you want to do something that uses the touchscreen to some degree. Don't make a match 3 game that you have to play with a controller on Xbox or something, because I don't feel like that would work. And yeah, it can also just mean try and make someone's hardware look great and awesome, and show but try and be the killer app. I guess. Like, try and be the killer app on someone's platform. And if you are, they'll be like, we like you. Here you are. Be on the store. Be in everything. Be on our like keynotes when we do presentations. And have reasonable and realistic metrics for success. I cannot stress this one enough. Like, has anyone here, who here shipped a game? You're all successful game developers, as far as I'm concerned. Because it's insanely hard. There's so many things that get shut down and things that don't make it, like, genuinely, like, success is a journey, not a destination. Like, you shouldn't just expect, like, I'm just gonna make this game once, I'm gonna make £1 billion, I'm gonna make Minecraft, like, on my first try. And, like, that's just not how things work. But finally, you also have to, like, make sure you have fun. Thanks for listening. This is actually a lie because I thought I might be too quick. So I have extra hidden slides. Okay, cool. Yeah, okay, cool. Because I knew I was like, I think I talked too quickly for that to fill out the time properly. So I didn't include this in the main part of the talk, but it's a thing. I think, who else? Andrew referenced this. Ingvild, did you mention this? The fact that luck is a thing. Like, I like to think that we were making our own luck with the 5 things that we were trying to do. We were trying to make a game that looked like nothing else anyone had ever seen. We were trying to play to the strengths of the platform. But sometimes things happen that you have no freaking control over, and they can like change your life in crazy ways. So some stuff like this happens. Like this is like the second week we were out. Like, has anyone heard of this Spanish singer called Ariana Grande? Apparently she's quite well known. She tweeted this. She played Monument Valley somehow. She saw Monument Valley, played it, decided it was cool to just tweet that to her, like, however many tens of millions of followers. That gave us a massive spike in revenue. Similarly, sometimes someone at Netflix will just put your game into House of Cards. So this is a cool story because someone at Netflix, like, emailed us. We thought it was a joke. They said, hey, we really like your game, we want to get in the House of Cards. We were like, yeah, sure. And sort of sent off the email, yeah. Sent the email out, heard nothing for a few weeks, got an email in which was like, oh, okay, here's the script. This is how we were like, what, huh? Okay. And so we read the script and we were like, yeah, we believe you're showing the game in a nice light. It wasn't like someone was playing this game and then going around killing little girls or anything like that. It was just nice. And then they send us back like the early like pre-release footage of it, and we saw like Kevin Spacey sat down in this. I don't know what's up with these fingers. Like, he was playing it like a pinchy game. I don't understand, but like we just saw him playing the game, and people were talking about Monument Valley, and we were like, oh my god, like this can happen. This is weird. But obviously, don't ever expect this sort of stuff to happen. But if it does, it's very good. Obviously, like while this episode was out, loads of money came in, and kind of annoyingly, people were writing articles like, oh, by the way, that game from House of Cards is real. And we were like, what? Like, I think at this point we'd already won like an Apple Design Award or something. So we felt like we're the biggest like rock stars in the world. And apparently, yeah, most people watching Netflix had no idea we existed, which is nice to sort of keep your expectations down. And also sometimes you get stuff like this. This was, the February of 2014. The game launched in April. And there was this massive, crazy discourse about Flappy Bird and Dong Nguyen. I'm not good at pronouncing that surname. Took the game down because he was terrified. He was so sad at the fact that his beautiful little simple game had become addictive, and it was starting up all this debate like, these mobile games are bullshit, man. All they do is just take all your money. They're just trying to take all your money, take all your time. And then we sort of came out like, what about you give us £2.50, and you play this game for an hour and a half, and then we never talk to you ever again and leave. And people were like, yeah, we want that. That's exactly what we want. So yeah, that was just lucky. I have been extremely fast, but I think that's okay because we had some technical issues before. So maybe it makes it easy. So I'm really finished now. Thank you. Bye. I'm not going to go on and do questions. That's okay. Thank you. It's been 40 minutes, actually. That's not bad.
Being
That's not bad.
an excellent producer, you saw that we were a bit behind time, and you've got us straight back on time, which is perfect.
Cut the scope of my talk a bit.
And we still have time for questions, so if anyone has any questions, would you like to come down and take the mic? Yeah.
Or I'm going to be hanging around for like the whole thing, and I'm very approachable and recognizable.
Hi, thanks for the great talk. It was really nice.
Oh, thank you very much.
So with such a large kind of amount of money in the bank, to put it like that. How does that affect kind of stress levels in the team? A lot of stress comes from not having enough money or not knowing when that's going to be. How does that affect kind of the creative discussions and talks and timeframes?
It makes us like, we're spoiled. We're super spoiled. We're pampered. Back when we were part of the studio in Shoreditch, the London studio, it's basically in like the most expensive part of Shoreditch. It's like the most expensive building. We got stuff like, we had breakfast and cereals provided by the company, and we did yoga every Wednesday and had massages and stuff, which is kind of why our development costs were so high, because of all these benefits and stuff. But it was just, it's a rare treat to be told like, make whatever you want. Yeah, it's fine. Like, there was no pressure. Like, because our track record had actually been kind of bad, there was like, they didn't expect anything of us. And it was sort of like, Monument Valley was our chance to be like, okay, we've been given this freaking golden ticket. We've been given like a blank check. Let's be like really like brave and audacious. Let's make a game that doesn't look like a game. Let's like, we could have just taken all the opportunity we're given and just be like, let's make the best Clash of Clans killer or something. But we're like, let's not even do that. Like, let's take an opportunity that we don't believe anyone else will ever get almost, and just try and push the boundary. So yeah, we were so relaxed. It was great.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
So, how when you want to put everything you want into a game, like you pull inspiration from everything and you put in whatever you want,
Yeah.
every idea you come up with that you love, how do you avoid overscoping when you're trying to make the finished project? Because we have, or there's like constant talks that overscoping is a problem, and that sometimes it becomes too much. How did you avoid that in the process?
For us, we actually made loads of content for the game. The main thing that decided if it went in or out was like how it user tested. We have a bunch of levels which people probably would have some people would have enjoyed, because people want really hard levels. And we made hard levels and we found like it turned people off so much. Like, it's only like such a small subset of people who would actually enjoy such difficult, stupid puzzles. One called The Wall, which was like literally almost like a freaking wall because no one can get over it. I think we just sort of stayed true to our principles. We like, this game can only last 90 minutes. When we did our user testing, we would like time it and be like, okay, we'd watch when people were getting a bit fatigued and see when people started to lose interest and be like, we can't hold their interest for longer than maybe 2 hours at max. And 90 minutes felt good. We had all that inspiration from films. We're like, films are about 90 minutes. We wanted to sort of treat it like that, sort of like an experience of like a finite length of time. We were pretty good. We were pretty good at cutting stuff, to be honest. Like, we didn't have a moment where like Dan, who was our producer on the project at the time, like saying we got to cut this. Like, I think Ken himself at the time was getting a bit bored of games that lasted forever. So it was more like he personally didn't. It was like almost like the team's interest was only as long as 90 minutes anyway. So yeah, mainly user testing. Like, if it didn't feel really good, we just trimmed it, because we want to be, as I say, all killer, no filler. So anything that felt like even remotely like mediocre level, bin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very good talk.
Oh, thanks.
So now this is probably different depending on who you ask, but what would be your personal insights on the whole working for a company versus starting your own company with people that you know?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever considered this. If you want to start a company, people, you know, like, I like stuff like, you know, Prune, which I showed. The guy who created that used to work at like, I think he used to work on Call of Duty games at like Castlevania, and I think he saved up. It depends. It depends on how like privileged you are. Like, I'm privileged in that I live in London. My parents are nearby. If I wanted to like quit my job and pursue this crazy dream, like, I'm cool with my parents. They'd let me move in with them. They wouldn't charge me rent. They just let me like just do whatever I wanted. I guess it varies a lot depending on like your personal like situation. I wouldn't ever suggest like, oh, quit your job, go do this. Like, you're definitely gonna do it. That's just very irresponsible. And I wouldn't recommend like, just like, you know, people say, let's make a band, man. Like, let's just like give up our jobs and do that. It's a bit like that. This market, this industry is a bit crazy. Like, you never know. I mean, it is cool that, where's Andrew? He said like you can get a game sign on a GIF, which is why I'm like, push the visuals of your game as much as I can. I think I'm not answering your question at all. I wouldn't recommend like quitting your day job unless you have the means to sustain yourself. Like, again, don't expect to like quit your job, make a game, be a billionaire, just relax. Is that any good to you?
supposedly seeing as it's a bit of a risky move to sort of start a company. And some people do say that you should probably start working for a company because then you own your skill while somebody else pays your bills.
That's a nice catchphrase. Yeah, it'd be quite cool. Yeah, I think like stay at a company, you can learn stuff, you can get a little insight. I just like security, like just generally as a personal thing. Like I'd rather probably like work, even if I wasn't even in the games and I was into games, I'd probably like still be cool working at like the home office or being a librarian while working on games in my spare time as a passion thing. But yeah, it's quite hard, you know. It's like it's art. Like I don't want anyone to be a starving artist. I would never recommend someone become a starving artist. So I don't know, take the risks that you're comfortable taking, I guess. If that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a quite good answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hi.
Fantastic talk.
You're too kind.
So what I wanted to ask was, did you ever think or dream about reaching where you are now?
No. To be honest, no. We were just like, I personally found the game, I was like, I don't know how people are going to react to this game. I was a bit skeptical. I was like, all right, we've seen the user testing, but I was like, we're in Shoreditch, it's like East End London, it's full of hipsters. I was like, is this game only going to appeal to hipsters? Or do you think like people's parents are going to really play this game? So yeah, I had conservative expectations. I thought I was proud of the work we did. I was like, this is good. Like, I think people will like this. I don't know if we're going to have like the commercial return that we're hoping for. So no, but it blew up. And again, all this lucky stuff happened as well. Like it was just like a lot of being at the right place at the right time, and the industry was, it had this massive, there was a huge discussion about, remember when people were like selling their phones with Flappy Bird installed because you couldn't get it from the store anymore? And people were like that hooked, and yeah, we just seemed to have the perfect like medicine. But no, didn't expect it. Very happy, like we now know not to expect that ever again, because we know all these crazy things happen, and we're just trying to like do our best to ever achieve something like this again, but realistically, like, it took us a while to accept that we will probably never have anything this big ever again.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Nice hat, by the way.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I know that there are a lot of students here. Great talk, by the way. And
You're all too
there
kind
are
in this
probably
country.
a lot of them curious what a producer does. How does one fill that role? Maybe what is your typical day?
A typical day, it's a mixed bag. We are still really small. So I came up via QA, which is a common route into production. You can just like get assistant producer roles. So my day is I get in about 9:45. At 10 a.m., my whole team has a stand-up. We do a team stand-up at 10. I run that. We have an artist working with us remotely in Italy. I mean, I get everyone. I basically I get everyone. I'm like, come on, guys, it's 10. We do this the same time every day. Everyone, come on. And I make everyone get in the room. We have a little Shaun the Sheep doll. Whoever's holding the Shaun the Sheep doll is allowed to speak. And you just basically say, yesterday I did this feature. Today I'm going to continue to work on this feature. And you just pass it around. And then people let me know if they have any sort of issues like, my Mac is running slow and I can't run Unity properly anymore. And I go, I'm going to get on that right after stand-up. So like that's about 15 minutes. Then I like check my emails. Probably a bunch of random stuff. Like no one else on the team really has to check emails apart from me. Go through all my emails. Probably some sort of meeting needs to occur. I need to like make sure the meeting rooms are booked. If unless I've booked it, then it's perfectly organized. So running around with meetings, facilitating stuff. I basically it's a lot of herding. I guess it's like being a parent to some degree, or like being like a sheep herder or farmer or something. Because like people genuinely forget stuff. Like you're the one who's like responsible for remembering all the things that need to happen day by day. So like, yeah, meetings, loads of meetings. I'll talk about stuff. I'll like sometimes do hiring. Like we're so small that sometimes like I'm in charge of the website. Like I maintain our website and stuff. I inherit a lot of random things that like no one else, like I'm not gonna ask our lead artist, like, can you put some job posts on the website? Like you basically do the jobs that everyone else hates. But it's great, production's great. Also a bit of like sort of scheduling. You do schedules and you look at like resourcing, and I'm like the one who's looking at the timeline of the project, and I think about ways I can encourage my team to, try not to scope too crazily and be like, hey, we've only got 3 months, and you want to make this work, which will take 8 months. So which ones? Oh, like, if you had to cut this or this, which would you cut? And stuff like that. Like you try and facilitate and help people make difficult decisions. But it's like I never tell them what to do. It's always just a process of like helping, facilitating, being a bit like a coach, like an agile coach. And it's coachy. It's good. I think it differs very greatly in like bigger studios, but
Thank you.
Thank you very much, mate.
Okay, so these will be the last two questions. Yeah.
So I don't really have a question, but rather just praise. I was really happy that you released Monument Valley on Windows Phone.
Oh, we make about £4 on that every quarter. it's really low.
One of those sales was my mum,
Thank you very much.
I think it's the only game she's ever finished.
That's awesome. Did you play it together?
No, I just told her about it and installed it on her phone, and then she wouldn't talk to me until she'd finished it.
Nice. Has she played anything else since?
The expansion pack for Monument Valley.
Nice. Thank you. I'll do checks in the mail. Thank you so much. Thanks for evangelizing my game. Hey.
Hello. Producing production questions. I've worked with a lot of different teams, a lot of different producers. Some of them are great and do their jobs, and some of them tend to veto a lot of the team's decisions, say, no, we're doing it my way. I know, right?
Yeah, why would you do that?
Terrible people. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about either how not to be a bad producer or how to deal with a bad producer if you were stuck with one?
Let me start with how not to be a bad producer. Be like really nice and friendly. Like I don't know. I'm happy to do like really like I'm happy to get my hands dirty and do like horrible stuff. I care about people. I'm one of those like touchy feely. I hug my team all the time. Like listen to people. Like I don't think I've ever really had an experience with like a bad producer who was like trying to get their own way. I feel like the only people I've worked with have like been like creative leads or like someone who kind of is allowed to have their own way. I mean, I guess it depends on the sort of studio culture as well. Like we're super open and honest. We're like super transparent. If you're interested in like how Monument Valley did, we've put out like infographics. Like we tell you exactly like where all our money's come from and what we spend it on. So we've sort of incorporated that culture into the blood. Like everyone we're friends. We actually like each other. It's really weird and annoying. Like we go to each other's weddings and stuff. I'm trying to think. Give me 1 second to think about like a negative interaction, because I've been here so long, I can't remember what it was like at other places almost. I mean, do you have like an HR department? Is there someone in the team whose like job is to sort of resolve conflicts? Because that's kind of my role. Like the producer should almost be the person to resolve the conflicts, but if it's like they're the person creating the conflicts, that makes it kind of weird.
Usually it's just me turning into the villain.
Oh, are you the?
I'm the one who stands up to the bad producer usually.
Okay. I thought you were saying that you were the villain. I was
No,
like, you're the
this
bad
is not a
guy.
trap,
Get
not a
out of here.
trap,
You're learning
no.
all my tricks. Okay.
No. I tried being a producer for a week. It was too much.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Like I would probably try and, unless you're like trained in like there's like conflict resolution. There's like courses you can do, and like there's a book called like Difficult Conversations where you could be like, hey, like I've been talking to everyone. You're being a bit of a dick, and like I've got this anonymous feedback from everyone that says you're a dick, and maybe you'd want to read that. Like, I mean, if someone's really like being toxic, like I wonder what that person's future in that company should kind of be. Like if they're being that bad. I don't know. I would try and like go to anyone whose like job it is to resolve that stuff. Like it can be quite a lot to take on, especially like someone. You don't know how someone's going to react if you sort of say, hey, can you be a bit nice? Like, fuck you, man. What do you know, man? I've been in this industry for blah, blah, blah years. You don't know shit. You guys all suck. And maybe you just kind of don't want that person on your team. So, yeah, go to the authorities. I don't know. But depending on how bad it goes, I'm not sure. But, yeah, if you can talk to them, if you feel comfortable and safe, like sort of having a bit of a heart-to-heart, a lot of times people do respect people being very honest. Like hopefully they'll identify the fact that it's very difficult to be like, hey, your behavior's having a negative impact on the whole team, and I don't know, raise their awareness. Some people just like don't know. You don't know what you don't know, you know. So maybe not even aware that they're being a dick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.
I'm really finished now.
Fantastic
Okay.
talk.
Thanks everyone. Sorry, it was really great.
As for a typical day in his studio, I do remember the time I visited us two when they were in the middle of a really intense Street Fighter 2 tournament, and Mike was so in the zone, he doesn't actually even remember the visit. But yeah, that seems to be part of the typical day there. So our final talk, we're going to switch over really quickly, so please don't go anywhere, and we'll be with you in 2. Thank you. So on to the final talk of the day, the one I'm very, very excited about. So our final speaker's career has incorporated art, design, and animation, and all of this and more he did on his latest project. He went from Linehead to Media Molecule, creative directing the multi-BAFTA award-winning game Tearaway along the way. In 2016, he co-founded the micro studio Foam Sword to develop the wonderful Kickstarted adventure Knights and Bikes, which has been published by Double Fine. I was a backer of the game and was lucky enough to get to work on the tie-in novels, and it was a pleasure to work with such a rich world and such vibrant, exciting characters, so it was a bit of a dream come true for me. So here to take us through the development of Knights and Bikes, a game about two girls on an emotional journey cycling around an English island in the 1980s, please welcome Rex Kroll.
Hello. Hey. Thanks, Gabrielle. It's really nice to be here. My first time in Norway. I just caught sight of myself in a mirror backstage, and I thought, oh God, I look like an English person stereotype of someone from Norway. But I do just dress like this all the time, I promise. Hello, my name's Rex, and I'm on the internet, on Twitter and Instagram as Rexbox. And I am, well, as Gabrielle said, I come from an art background, but games, you have to do all kinds of disciplines, particularly if you're working on quite experimental projects or on very small teams. So I've kind of done whatever I need to do to make games, and sometimes I've worked in short films and advertising as well. But just talking about games today. And I've also been half of this tiny little micro studio called, I haven't done my little, hey, there we go, have to have that. I've been one half of this tiny little games making studio called Foam Sword, which is a company that I set up with my friend Moo Yu. And we first worked together more than a decade ago at Media Molecule. And we worked together on Little Big Planet. And then we went off and did separate things. I stayed there and directed a game called Tearaway. Moo went off and did kind of more, experimented with mobile games and setting up various companies. But then we got back together again a few years ago to do a Kickstarter for a game called Knights and Bikes. And Moo works on the technical side, all the kind of clever stuff. He does the AI and the online multiplayer and all of these kind of hardcore elements. And then I use my background in design and art to build out the game world, design the levels, create the story that's going to pull you through the world, hopefully. And also, try and make it look nice. And we also collaborate with a couple of other people. We've got our friend Kenny, who was head of audio at Media Molecule for a long time. So we've worked very closely with him. And then also another old friend, Daniel, who I've collaborated with him on every project I've worked on. And he's a film composer. And he's done the music for Knights and Bikes, which is, it was really special that he was still able to help out a friend, because he's a big Hollywood guy now. He just did a little known film called Spider-Verse, composed the soundtrack for that, which is just incredible. And he's just on a roll. He's just done Dark Crystal as well, and what's the new one? Harley Quinn is coming up soon. So just wanted to represent everyone who's on the team. We're tiny, but I'm standing here talking about art and stuff, but everyone else is working hard as well. So, little drink, make Mike happy. I'm not used to water. So, where are we? Yes. So, I'm going to be talking about our game, Knights and Bikes. This is what it looks like. Here's the two main characters, Demelza and Nessa, and a puffin. Very important. And I'm going to go into, quite a bit of detail on how the art style helped define, obviously it defines like how it looks. That's fairly obvious. That's what art does. But also like how it affects like how you play it, and also how players will feel about it. The art style can really help with that connection between the player and the game, make a more emotional bond. And then also, this is a bit of a weirder one, but also like how the art was shaped by the characters that are in the game. You kind of want to make these characters feel like they're real and they're responding to the game that they're in, the world that they're in. So it becomes more like a collaboration between like what they're experiencing and they're like telling me about it, and I'm trying to like paint it and represent their feelings in the game. Yeah, and I really want to just cover how you can make sure the art style, the gameplay, and the tone are all influencing each other and working together in really close harmony, if you get it right. So hopefully this isn't going to be anything like just a sales pitch of the game, which is available now on PlayStation 4, PC, Mac, and Linux for a very, very, very reasonable €16. Right, a little bit of background about me. I started out as a sheep farmer. When I was born, my parents gave me 2 of my own sheep so that I could grow out a little flock. And gradually, every year, my collection of sheep got bigger and bigger, as sheep do what sheep do, and there were more of them. And they were wonderful animals. Gave them all names. Very very close. Kind of, it sounds weird, like close friends with all of them, but they were a lovely flock. And then one day, I sold them all, and I used the money to buy a computer. And that's what I got started with. Despite what you think, that's not me. That's just a guy from the internet. And it was a Amiga 500 computer. Did anyone have one of those? Yes, best computer ever. And I think it really appealed to me because it was like seemed to me like the first affordable computer. Well, affordable if you have a flock of sheep that you're prepared to murder. To like use, it was a very creative machine. You could use it to make art and music. Here's Andy Warhol using one to paint Debbie Harry, and that was kind of like, oh wow, this is quite inspiring that it's being used for like visual work. Because up until that point, I thought computers were, you had to type something in. If you spelt it wrong, it would explode. They were very, they were kind of scary. They weren't very approachable. And I'm a very visual person, so, that was quite hard to, connect with them. And I used this incredible technology to make really bad games. That's actually a photo from my parents' house, a close-up of the Amiga, and I'm only showing a tiny bit of the game because it looks so bad. These are my first ever 3D rendered models, and they are supposed to be heads. They're just like meat bags. I think they were bad games at the time because I didn't really have anything I wanted to say with the games. I was just like, the only statement I was making was, I like games, I want to make games. And that's not that interesting for an audience. I was just like a fanboy for the technology, which is a bit like, using a pencil to only draw pictures of pencils. It's kind of it's not that interesting. So luckily, I went off to art college, discovered life, and sort of forgot all about games for a few years. Just wanted to soak up lots of new influences and just find a voice. And I studied graphic design. Even though I was like much more of an illustrator, I kind of wanted to learn about the wider context of how my artwork was going to be used. And that really helped to like balance like form and function, art and design. And that kind of started this ongoing goal of that I was referencing earlier of wanting like art and design to work together in harmony. And I also learnt my most important lesson. Let me demonstrate. I was very worried there might be someone standing over there when I put that slide on. I should have asked a volunteer to come up, shouldn't I, before I put that up. But yeah, and this was a really important thing I learnt at art college. There's always going to be far more talented people at drawing hands, at drawing feet, and definitely at drawing horses. But this really freed me up because I wasn't worrying so much about the rendering skill. It was more about what message are you trying to convey and what's the best way to do it. So and I'm talking about art, but it's the same for any whatever discipline you're working in. But anyway, this particular combination of wanting to use more mixed media and play around with technology and stuff sort of brought me closer to making interactive art. And the other thing I learned at this point was the software Flash, which I really loved. It just made it freed up creativity very easily. It was very easy to just drag in lots of different items and just play around. Far more easier than the sort of more game-making software I'd tried to use previously. That's one of my earliest animations I ever made, sort of summing up my experiences at art college. Quite pleased with that one. And yeah, I just made a bunch of stuff in Flash for quite a few years and really enjoyed just how expressive you could get with the software. And these little animated experiments, they started to become quite game-like. I made little point-and-click adventures and stuff like that. And that ended up getting me hired first into Lionhead Studios, who were making big, crazy simulations at the time. And, it was a fantastic experience. I met some of the best people ever. But the games weren't necessarily that... they weren't that experimental in their visual style. I was there quite early on, but when things like Fable started to become successful, it became about building bigger and bigger simulations. Incredibly ambitious and cool, but also, that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. But luckily enough, there were a bunch of us that felt similarly, so we all kind of went off and did our own thing, mainly posing for really terrible photos. And we, founded this new company called Media Molecule. And this is over 10 years ago. And there was no real indie scene at the time. And we just kind of wanted to get back to making games that were about fun and connectivity and had maybe more of a playful aspect to them. We talked about sort of playfulness and creativeness, trying to combine those things together. And we made this game, which you might have heard of. I don't know, it's actually quite a long time ago now, called Little Big Planet. And, this was a game about making your own levels, building things, creating stuff for yourself. And I think this is quite a nice example of art style, but has a real purpose, because we wanted game making and level making to be very approachable. And anytime you watch a documentary about video games, they always have bits like this, it's all technical and it's UV unwrapping and look how cool it is and you will never understand any of this. And, it's kind of off-putting for someone who's not making games professionally. So we just wanted to bring it right back to cardboard and string and glue and, those kind of childhood materials that you're very used to as a kid. You know, take you back to those days of just gluing bits of stuff together and, you know, making a little rocket car, but in a video game form. And then after that, this is a game called Tearaway, which is a project that I led. And this was a big learning process for me because it was the first opportunity for me to lead a team. And just, again, really focus on, you know, making sure that the game's look and feel and the whole reason for existing were all, you know, very combined together. Because, as you can hopefully see, the whole of Tearaway was made out of paper. And that could have just been a style choice. You know, I could have just gone, paper, that looks cool. Let's make a game out of paper. But actually, the paperiness came from the fact that it was the first game that we'd made on a handheld. I don't know how many of you ever had a Vita. They weren't super successful, but they were a really interesting Sony device. And, you know, this was the first time we'd ever tried to make a handheld game, and it was very sort of touchable. You know, it had a touch screen on the front, touch screen on the back, and you know, it felt that making a little universe out of paper would be, you know, it would be really responsive, just to the way you're touching the screens, the way you're tilting the screen. You know, it was a real unification of like how it looked and how it would play and how it would feel. Here's a tiny little bit of footage that was very early on, just sort of previs stuff of trying out different paper ideas. At this stage in the studio, the production team, they had a great idea of bringing in a pop-up book designer who, you know, showed us all of the different types of folds you could do with paper, and, you know, that was really inspiring and really kind of unblocked some of our, some of our preconceptions. You know, it made us step away from traditional level design and really think about paper in a very expressive way. Anyway, or maybe I'll just show you this. It's like an epic battle. Ah. Anyway, so back to the main point of, you know, trying to make sure that an art style is fully integrated with the way that you interact with the game, and also looking at whether it can enhance the way people, you know, feel about the game as they're playing it. So after making Tearaway, I wanted to take a bit of time out and work on something a little bit smaller scale, kind of almost a bit more like a hobby, something that I could work on at home. And me and Moo started talking about doing something that was a little bit based on the movie The Goonies. I don't know, everyone seen The Goonies? Anyone? Who's seen The Goonies? Oh, quite a lot of people. That's good. It's a classic. And, you know, that movie is all about kids, you know, being in a gang, trying to go and find some lost treasure. And that felt like, I don't know, just quite a nice starting point that we could, you know, just develop in all kinds of different ways. And this project was probably going to be more conventional than either Little Big Planet or Tearaway, you know, much smaller team, just the two of us. And we kind of thought of it more as a modern version of a Super Nintendo game that, you know, maybe a couple of friends could play, sat on the same couch together, and just make something really about the friendship of the two characters in the game world and the friendship of the two people playing the game simultaneously. So, so for this project, the art style is more about enhancing the player's feelings rather than, you know, sort of trying to be particularly experimental. There's some stuff. Right, so let's put a trailer on and then you can see how it looks. It's quite loud. Well, it might be quite loud. Let's find out.
I wanna ride my bike. I wanna ride my bike all day and all night. I wanna ride my bike. I wanna ride my bike. I wanna ride my bike all day and all night. I wanna ride my bike. Hey, hey, get out of my way. Hey, hey, get out of my way. Hey, hey, get out of my way. I wanna ride my bike. I wanna ride my bike all day and all night. I wanna ride my bike. I wanna ride my bike. I wanna ride my bike all day and all night. I wanna ride my bike. Hey, hey, get out of my way. Hey, hey, get out of my way. Hey, hey, get out of my way.
There we go. Right, some bikes. Oh, cheers. Thank you. So the main themes of the game, it's really important when you've got a game to like really like define your themes. I think, from a lot of the talks we've seen over the last couple of days, like other creators have talked about the pillars of their game, and our ones were like childhood, it's about a couple of kids, friendship, both like friends in the game and also friends playing the game together. Exploration, it needs to have a great world to explore and run around in and ride your bike in. And also imagination, like a big deal was like, how are the kids going to perceive this world and how are they going to add to it? And get that sort of interesting juxtaposition between like what's it like to see something as a kid compared to like an adult who's a bit more kind of maybe lost a bit of the imagination along the way. Or more specifically, it's about like bunking off school with your new best friend, jumping on your bikes to go hunting for a legendary lost treasure that might or might not exist, while filling your pockets with all kinds of everyday loot that kids, actually love to collect. All those like weird, disgusting things that kids have in their pockets, like worms and bits of string and pre-chewed chewing gum and all of that. And it's a coming-of-age adventure that bumps up against the reality of the adult world around you, but at least you always have each other, the two of you, Ness and Demelza, and also your pet goose, Captain Honkers. Someone told me that there's like another game about a goose that's come out. I don't know. I mean, it's passed me by. I have no idea. But geese are apparently very popular, and releasing a game right round now is a good thing to do. The origins of making this are, well, it's going to be a personal project, something on quite a small scale, just made by two of us for most of the time. We needed it to be something that was like scaled to that size. We kind of went a bit overboard with like the amount of content, but the actual like pipeline to make the assets, needed to be really quick and easy. So yeah, I mean, everything kind of needed to be like painted in Photoshop and then pulled into Unity. There's kind of not like a concept art stage, it's just like do the concept art, cut it out, put it in the game. There's no like, oh, now we have to we have to model it and texture it and kind of almost like keep repeating what you've already done. And as I said, we took inspiration from the Goonies. We decided we were going to kickstart the project, so we needed some way of like bringing people in, like making some like cultural shortcuts. So they're like, oh yeah, I love the Goonies. I watched that as a kid, and what's this thing that's sort of a bit like it and a bit like a bunch of Super Nintendo games, all like up to date with cool graphics and online shenanigans. And it was going to be a game about childhood, adventure, imagination, and energy. So we needed a setting for this adventure. It needed to happen somewhere that like the kids could like really use their imagination on it, and just unleash all of this crazy kid energy on the landscape. So I grew up. You probably shouldn't look too closely at that map on the other side. It's very bad. But I grew up in that bottom little bit of the UK called Cornwall. And Moo grew up just outside of LA in Anaheim, which is where Disneyland is. So he knew all about theme parks and all of that stuff. And I knew all about sort of rugged little English, Cornish settings. So we decided to base it on the area that I grew up in, but with a little bit of influence from like theme parks and what have you, because Cornwall is somewhere that's very it's somewhere people go for vacations and go and visit theme parks, but take a bit of that sort of LA Disneyland stuff as well. And like focusing on Cornwall, it's a very rural area. It's a really cool place to go on rugged walks, and explore the cliff tops and the little fishing towns, and there's all kinds of ruins of old forts and old castles. It's actually, it kind of depends a little bit who you talk to, but it's actually supposed to be where King Arthur lived. He had this castle called Tintagel, which is basically Camelot. So yeah, very, very famous for King Arthur. Even more famous for his big breakfasts. Definitely recommend those. And it's a place of magic and fantasy, but it's also like one of the poorest regions in Europe, which has a big impact on the look and themes of the game. It's an area that was once industrial, but now has to rely on tourism, and that became quite a theme on the landscape as well. You want to think about how much, what are the resources that the people have in this area. So yeah, that kind of fed through as well. And that's my first ever page from my sketchbook on this project. And a sketchbook is where I like to just start any project. And I just think sketchbooks are just the best. Should we start this video? Is that starting? Yeah, there we go. So have a little flick through there. It all goes in the sketchbook. And I think of sketchbooks kind of more like journals. They're like a way of like externalizing a problem, or just getting stuff out and putting it down on a page. Particularly once you've got it out, you can return to it later. So if there's some problem you can't solve, then get it down on the page, and then you can come back to it later, and you've got a new take on that situation. I also think that like sketchbooks are really good because they give you a break from like the digital tools. You know, if I'm at my laptop, I'm thinking like a laptop person. I'm all like, Whereas if I've got a sketchbook and I'm sitting, you know, out in the countryside, you know, you think differently. And I think, you know, the tools that you're using do affect the kind of ideas that you have. Yeah, so, you know, if you're using Photoshop, you have Photoshop type ideas. If you're using Maya, it can sort of drag you in certain directions. And sometimes sketchbooks just free you up to just, you know, think without any digital influence. So basically, I think just generally, the more time you spend on paper, the more fun you can have on the computer afterwards. Once a whole bunch of, I've filled up like so many of these books. I've actually got to scan them all in and publish them soon. It's going to be quite a job. And that's kind of how the game looks once it's all, once a lot of sketches are done and taken into Photoshop and then painted up. This is like a little harbour village scene. And, you know, it's just lots of little paintings layered up. This is a slightly uglier view, but you can see how it's all just a big fake. Lazy developers. There's another static scene of riding your bicycles around the shoreline. And something that's kind of interesting to like solve is that you've got things standing up and you've got a ground plane, and you've always got to like cover up where the things standing up meet the ground plane so that it's kind of smooth and you're not just seeing all these cut off horizontal lines everywhere. But luckily, you know, we set it in quite a natural, overgrown kind of environment, so you're always putting little brush strokes and bits of seaweed or whatever, you know, bushes and things at the base of things to help blend that all in. Here's another scene. This is the bike shop where you go to upgrade your bikes and customize them. And at the start of the project, we actually just had a 2D camera, and it didn't have any perspective. You know, it didn't really move around with you. But you know, one of the core points of the game was about exploration. And the trouble was, you know, it was kind of like this. They would just move around the scene, and as a player, we're never seeing anything new as the characters move around because the camera is static. So we then moved to a 3D camera that would follow you around. So instantly, like, the scene becomes more interesting because as they run around, you know, things are revealed. So it just became a more interesting way to explore the landscape. And here's the bike shop again, doing another of these little reveals. Very, very simple scenes. They do take quite a long time to layer up, though. There's another example. Yeah, and although, you know, it is quite painstaking, like, you know, piecing all this stuff together, I do want you to know that this is how I solve most design problems. Honestly, you know, sometimes just cover up the stuff that isn't working, because you'll be able to spend more time like painting something cool, you know? Yeah, so there's just a whole lot of bushes in the game that are hiding all kinds of art sins. So yeah, that's some of the art process. But you know, what are the artistic influences on this? You know, it's not just like the natural landscape just sitting there drawing it. You know, what other things are like feeding into the look. So one of the strongest ones was this artist called Alfred Wallace. Here he is. And he actually lived in very, very close to where I grew up, but, you know, much earlier. And he was just a fisherman. He didn't go to art school, didn't have any training, and he would just use the paint that he was supposed to paint his boat with, he would paint scenes. And, really, because he didn't have any training, he painted in these like really wild perspectives, which I found really inspiring. It I kind of wanted to play a bit more with the fakery of like 2D and 3D and just become a bit more expressive with it because of his work. Because like very early on, I was being really conservative and just painting everything almost like textures you're going to put on a box, and then just putting a bit more of a side on and making them start to look like actual, they look like actual houses rather than just textures. And then, going a little bit more, I don't know, just adding more perspective and more wonky angles into stuff. And surprisingly, it all actually starts to work. And it got closer to the way that like kids will actually draw. They'll just exaggerate things. They'll focus on the details, that are more important to them. They'll draw people with enormous heads, but like no arms, and really interesting like style choices based on just what's important to them. Sometimes they'll draw things that like half the things that should be on the back are on the front, because it's just making kind of interesting like visual choices. So it just felt like we're getting much closer to like how the kids in the game might like draw it themselves, which became the real key to the visual style. Try and represent the world as the kids would try and represent it themselves. So you're kind of feeling like you're sort of seeing it through their eyes, and that just made everything a little bit fuzzy, a little bit scribbly. Using these materials, the kind of materials that they would have if they were at school or at home. And the whole game's painted with 2 brushes. There's like this soft one for like natural stuff, and then there's like this harder edge one for doing outlines. And that's really helped with the, whoa, look at that time. This has really helped with really honing in the design style of the game and making sure it looks really unified. If you're making a whole universe with lots of different elements, it's really cool to have like a self-imposed limitation like this to just pull it all together and make sure it all looks, part of that same world. There's a few things. I'll skip through these to speed up a bit. It's a bit of live painting, which if we'd had loads of time, that's like 2 hours long, but I might skip forward. A bit more. Bit of soft brush. Bit of chin. And in the early stages of development, most things were designed quite simply in vectors, like this. It's very easy to like push them around, very easy to edit. And you get a nice bold silhouettes, and then rework them a bit in the paintbrushes, and bring them into the style, and then refine them a little bit more. And there's the final version, which is all ready for a bit of animation. And for animation, it needed to convey that energy and excitement that kids have as well. So everything's kind of painted, well, pretty much with like 3 or 4 frames, so it can all like wobble and move around a little bit, to kind of suggest that, I don't know, it just gets more of that kid energy, and the fact that there's no like one particular way to look at anything, and it sums up a bit more of like the stormy atmosphere of the landscape as well. There's some character stuff. I can't always go like quite as wild as I'd like to with the like redrawing, particularly on like the main characters. But then there's elements like her hair that has just still got that stop motion style. So it slightly feels like, I always like to think of it, it's like Demels's hair is like almost like thought bubbles. They're kind of like the ideas like fizzing out of her head as she's running around this world. And having this style has been really useful for showing how the kids are like imagining things and like adding to the landscape with their own imaginations. So this is in a scrapyard, all full of like rusty old cars and junk and stuff, and just being the place that kids should never really go into, but always will. And this is a car crusher. And as the kids run around, you can see how they sort of see it more like a dragon, and they're like feeding things to it, and things get pooped out the other end as well. You know, they're kind of like augmenting the landscape with their own imaginations. And a big influence on that was this guy called Bob Godfrey, who used to make this show. It's a really old show, sort of like mid-70s, called Rhubarb and Custard. And you know, I saw repeats of it when I was little. And I just love this style so much. It's so wild, so energetic. There's just so much happening. It's quite a weird phrase to have on stage. It's a kids show, jeez. You know, and I just want to call out as well that like music is a big influence as well. So here it is with music. Okay. Yeah, so I just want to say that, you know, influences on visuals don't have to be visual. And sometimes, you know, getting back to that thing I was talking about earlier of, you know, realizing that you're not always like, you're not the best artist in the world, but, you know, just have fun and do your own thing and, you know, don't get caught up on that. Sometimes I think it's very easy when you're on a project to like just keep looking at reference material and like looking at other artist stuff, and you're like, oh, it's so cool, but it can be like a bit of a distraction. So actually, when I'm working on a project, I like to get inspired more by music and by like spoken word stuff rather than other imagery. So this particular harbour scene is really inspired by Dylan Thomas, the poet. His work Under Milk Wood, which is narrated by Richard Burton. I'm just going to play you a tiny bit here, and you know, maybe like, you know, just listen to the words. And you know, this is something I'll put on when I'm working on the game, because it just, I don't know, it just creates so much more imagery in your head than any amount of like Google image searches could ever, you know, put in your brain.
It is spring, moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black. The cobbled streets silent, and the hunched quarters and rabbits wood limping invisible down to the slow black, crow black, fishing boat bobbing sea. The houses are blind as moles, though moles see fine tonight in the snouting velvet dingles, or blind as Captain Cat, there in the muffled middle by the pump and the town clock, the shops in mourning, the welfare hall in widow's weeds, and all the people of the lulled and dumbfound town are sleeping now. Hush, the babies are sleeping. The farmers...
Oop, wake up. Right. Yeah, so, you know, hopefully you can sort of get a sense of like how inspiring, you know, it can be to just listen to audio like that rather than just, you know, Google image search, look at pictures of boats and draw more boats. I just wanted to, how's that tie? Maybe I'll skip the bit about audio. No, that would be bad. So yeah, I just wanted to have this little tiny bit from Kenny, and Kenny like has done the sound design. And he, you know, he obviously, you know, he's really into audio as well. He has done this crazy thing with all the sound effects in the game where, well, I'll let him explain.
Another way that I've tried to pay homage to the 1980s is by bouncing all the audio in the trailer to cassette tape, that wonderful steampunk technology we had when I was a kid. So for Daniel's music, I gave that the 5-star treatment, and I bounced that to a Type 4 metal cassette. And then, but with the sound, I was a little bit rougher. I put it onto a much cheaper tape, bought off of eBay, and that is like 4 generations old. It's been bounced to tape 4 times to just really try and munge the sound up a bit. So here's an A/B comparison between the original kind of pristine digital version of the trailer and now the cassette tape version.
Right, I'm going to let you into secret. I can't tell any difference between those two. I don't know if anyone can. You might have better ears than me. I can't tell any difference. But, you know, it's quite inspiring. I just really love how he's using the technology. And like sometimes these things can influence things in ways that you're not necessarily expecting, like just having all these tapes around and, you know, they're all getting in the way. They inspired a mini game in the final game where, you know, a tape has completely unspooled and you have to use your fingers competitively to like wind up more tape than your player. So, you know, sometimes you do weird things and it works out, you know, in a way that you're not expecting. Just like, you know, back on Tearaway, getting a pop-up book expert in, you know, got us to make a game out of papercraft. You know, these things can influence in strange ways. 30 seconds. Last bit, luckily, nostalgia. Did He-Man just do his thing? He must have. I wasn't looking. So, you know, it's a very highly flavored game, you know, set in this region that I grew up in. You know, it's quite personal. But we can't really overlook how much, like, nostalgia and pop culture has, like, helped us. You know, it does, like, help bring people in and, like, you know, create more, like, relatability. I've heard several people talk about that on, you know, talks here past couple of days. You know, you want to bring people in so that then you can, you know, you can add to it. You know, you can surprise them and show them like a more developed world or a world that they weren't really expecting. You know, some of the influences we took from pop culture, apart from the Goonies, was this game Earthbound on the Super Nintendo. And then, you know, plastic toys from the 80s. And this bike, this was the bike I always wanted. It's called a Rally Vector. And it actually, well, this might have been marketing, but it had a computer built in and it talked to you. I mean, bikes now don't have stuff like that. So incredible. I mean, wild. And the 80s setting is really popular at the moment. Obviously, there's things like, you know, Stranger Things, and I think, you know, it's a popular period because a lot of the stuff that we have now kind of existed in some form back then. So, you know, mobile phones did exist. You know, you just had to like wheel them around. They were so big. And like Netflix kind of existed. It just existed in a video library where you had to go and get the films from. So, you know, there's some connection between now and then. If we'd set the game in like the 50s, like it'd be much harder to connect with. A few more examples of stuff. There's a little battle you have with your, well, they're not He-Man, they're Prince Castleman characters. And you know, what was really important to us, though, is to make sure that we didn't go like super 80s with it, that it was a bit more nuanced, you know, so that players would, I don't know, so it, you know, it felt more like its own story, and also, you know, I think sometimes films, everyone sort of they make out that like on the 1st of January 1980, everyone like dressed up in neon and jumped in their DeLorean car, and you know, like I don't know, it like you need money and you need to be like connected to have all the new toys and the new tricks, you know, and this is quite a sort of economically like depressed area, so you know, we wanted to make more of a statement with like, you know, how 80s it was. So essentially the game is more like finding like an old Polaroid photo of like a family holiday rather than like some mass media recreation of the past. I'll just skip through this very quickly. I'll just show you, these are when we take it on tour and like take it to promotional shows, we like to try and like bring the game out into the space that we're showing it in, so that it will then bring players in more. So, you know, it's actually kind of a weird thing, but it's cheaper to like recreate an entire kid's bedroom with stuff that you build and make yourself than just get like a vinyl banner printed. So, you know, it kind of works out nicely, and it creates like a nice space that's very welcoming to kids, and also something that like brings their parents in. And we kind of want the game to like create like a dialogue between players, not just like, you know, saving or solving a puzzle, but also like if a parent's like playing it with their kid, you know, the parents is getting all excited about the, you know, 80s influences, and the kids are just wanting to run around and cycle and hit things. So yeah, so essentially, you know, taking the Goonies as this starting point, and then, you know, just trying to make sure that we're adding to it with lots of like personal memories and things that are very relatable to all kinds of players and their families. And something that's really cool about sort of creating a world and then, you know, that has some of this pop culture, but has like plenty of room to become its own thing, is that, you know, you might get an opportunity to like work with cool people who are like really good writers, like this person, Gabrielle Kentz, that, you know, maybe some of you have heard of. So there's 2 books of Knights and Bikes already. Hopefully there might be a 3rd one, maybe. And also we just sold the rights to do a children's animated series. So, you know, that's pretty exciting. So, yeah. Woo! I skipped so many words on those last few slides. I hope they made sense in some way. So, a little summary. Like sketchbooks, you know, really good for generating ideas. And, you know, they give you different ideas from digital tools. You know, take personal stories, you know, make it, put things in that people haven't necessarily seen before, but, you know, sort of then combine it with some broad pop culture so that it's very relatable as well. You know, placing some limitations on the art style, like, you know, painting everything in 2 brushes can really help with the cohesion. You know, it's really fun to think about how your characters are going to see the world that's around them, but also like how they're feeling about the world. You know, what can you do to the art and the way it's, you know, that you're interacting with it that is representing how they're feeling. You can, you know, derive lots of gameplay from those visuals and those feelings. Take lots of inspiration from audio. Doesn't always have to be other visuals. Use pop culture to bring players in, but then surprise them with new experiences. And then you can create spaces in and out of your game for players to share their own stories and memories. You know, players playing with their parents and getting different feelings. And, you know, ultimately, like, just be more than just a fan of the medium. I'd always like to finish up by showing you, this is an actual poster for a death metal festival, featuring all the bands and their logos. And I would say that when you're creating a game, try and be party canon. Be yourself, make interesting choices, enjoy what you do, soak up the world, subvert what's being overused, and be the party canon of this industry. Thank you very much.
We are bang to time now, but I think it would be unfair not to allow a couple of super quick questions if anyone has any super quick questions. Awesome, you're close to the front as well.
Hi.
Hello.
So I've seen that included in the audio design is sounds of the imaginations of the girls as well. Was this a decision made on your part as creative lead or on the sound designer's part? And how much part of the design was the sound designer?
So I think that's, you know, like visually, I created, you know, some of this like visual imaginings of the kids. But then Kenny like jumped on board with that and took it in new directions, and you know, thought of ways to bring it into the audio experience that I really liked. So, I mean, my favorite example I always use is when you jump on your bikes, you hear like a little horse like neighing in the background, and it just makes you feel like, oh, I feel a bit like a knight, you know, like saddling up and going into battle. So, and there's lots of other little moments like that in the game that are quite subtle, but they just give everything a little twist into the more fantastical. Or sometimes if something's very fantastical, it's very useful to just pull it back into the slightly more mundane, everyday language with the visual, I mean with the audio. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so we'll have to wrap up there, but
Okay.
thank you so much, Rex, for a fantastic end to the day.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's been a wonderful few days, and you know, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you've got a lot out of the talks we've had. I'd just like to, I know the speakers are scattered around the audience, but if you could just stand up wherever you are or stick your heads out of the AV tents. Have we got any speakers in the room? Yeah, a few scattered around. Any hiding around the corners? I'd just like to say a huge thank you to these guys for, you know, coming over from, you know, all over the world to talk to you guys this week. So thank you very much. And you know, a huge thanks to all of you guys as well for your attentiveness and your passion over the last few days, and for some absolutely brilliant questions. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to invite someone to the stage. So this is the festival director who has coordinated this whole thing from her home in Tokyo, sort of leading a team of people from all around the world. So please welcome Sylvia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Konsoll 2019. I hope you've had a good time. Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful event for us too, and I hope, as much as we hope it has been for you. So I know that Gabrielle mentioned this, but I would really like to thank the speakers for making their way here to share their knowledge and experiences with us. It's been wonderful to have so many speakers coming from abroad and Norway to meet our Norwegian industry. This year, we had the largest amount of speakers, 26 speakers. So I think that's pretty amazing. We've been really growing. In comparison, 2 years ago, we had only 13 speakers. So many people have helped to make this conference happen, but I'd like to give a special thank you to our fantastic team who've been working hard from all corners of the world to bring you Konsoll. So if I can invite them to join me up on stage, we have Katrina Pentela, Aslak Helgesen, Endre Baklund, Tom André Christensen, Robin Garen Aaberg, Nicolas Mjøs, Erika McConnell, Kei Ishizaki, Gianne van der Berg, Marius Finstuen, Jørn Lavoll, John Edward Armstrong, Satish Shu Horak, and our amazing game master, Gabrielle Kent. So please help me give them a warm round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey. Thank you. So there's still so many names and so many people I have to thank, but I need to tell you, we've had some amazing red shirts joining us this year. Our volunteer team, Celine Gulliksen, Charlotte Victoria Molnar, Fredrik Haugen, Jørgen Hjelvik Mathisen, Caroline Aho, Maja Ulleberg, Roland Kvam, and Vebjørn Netland. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. So since you're here, you might not know it, but we've been improving this year's stream by having a group from BSTV join us. They've been working hard to bring our talks to those at home. So we have a big crew this year to bringing you our stream. We'd like to really thank the stream team leader, Anastasia Vilisleva, Sarah, Eirin, Anne-Cecilia, Even, Ingvild, Christer, Arnie, Eugenia, Miriam, Erland, Frida, og Brynjar. Thank you so much to our streaming team behind this curtain. We also had an amazing technician helping us backstage, Isabel. Please. Yeah. And we'd like to give a heartfelt thank you to our partners and sponsors, without whom we wouldn't be here. So, Bergen kommune, Kulturrådet, sponsoring us. And last but not least, I would like to thank our gracious hosts, Grieghall. It's always a pleasure to host Konsoll here. Thank you. So, thank you all again for coming to Konsoll. We hope you enjoyed our incredible lineup of speakers this year and feel full of inspiration. Thank you. All right, that's it, I think. Yeah, safe journey home. Thank you very much.